Hello and welcome to Revenge Diaries. If you believe that respect should never be earned through silence, that dignity has no expiration date, and that the quietest people often carry the loudest truth, then this story is for you. Please, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell because stories like this, they remind us of the power of grace, even when the world turns cold. Today's story was sent to us by a woman who sat quietly on her own porch, only to overhear her grandson whisper words no elder should ever have to hear. She won't be around much longer. She could have broken. She could have begged. Instead, she remembered exactly who she was, and she made sure they never forgot her again. This is the story of the day they tried to erase her, and how she came back unforgettable. Let's begin. The porch was old, its wood weathered by decades of summers, winters, and everything in between. I had painted it myself once. Soft sky blue back when Daniel was just a boy, and there was more laughter than tension in this house. Now, it creaked beneath my rocking chair as I listened quietly from behind the screen door. Inside, my daughter-in-law's heels tapped sharply on the hardwood. She was talking loudly, the way she always did when she thought I wasn't listening. My grandson Corey was with her 13 years old now, growing into someone I barely recognized. I just don't get why she always has to sit out there like a ghost, she muttered. It's weird. Corey chuckled. She probably won't be around much longer anyway. I stopped rocking. My breath caught midair. Those words didn't come from anger. They weren't even said cruelly, just casually, like they were talking about an old car about to break down. My hands trembled. They didn't know I was just on the other side of the screen. Didn't know I heard everything. Didn't know what I had prepared. Didn't know that the soft-spoken grandmother they'd taken for granted was, in fact, the only name listed on the will that mattered. And it wasn't theirs. It was mine. When my late husband Henry passed, I inherited everything. The house, the land, the savings, even the rental property 2 blocks down. But I never flaunted it. I let Daniel and his family move in when times were tough. I said nothing when Amanda, my daughter-in-law, remodeled the kitchen without asking. I didn't even protest when they swapped my favorite chair for a modern couch that made my back ache. I thought kindness meant silence. I thought family meant patience. But that comment, that single sentence from my grandson, she won't be around much longer, it shattered something inside me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Someday, I wouldn't be around, and the legacy I'd leave behind would fall into the hands of people who saw me as a burden. Unless I changed that, unless I stood up not with shouting or vengeance but with quiet, undeniable truth. That evening, I made a call, not to Daniel, not to Amanda, but to Mr. Levinson, my lawyer of 30 years, the one who had walked me through every legal paper since Henry's passing. It's time, I told him, time to update the will. He didn't ask why. He knew me well enough to recognize the shift in my voice. I'll bring the paperwork over tomorrow morning, he said. You want to do it here at the house? No, I said firmly. My garden, 10 a.m. He chuckled. You always did love that garden. I slept deeply that night, not because I was free from pain, but because for the first time in a long while, I felt clear about what mattered, clear about what didn't. The next morning, Amanda barely glanced at me as I passed her. In the hallway, she was on the phone, probably talking to one of her sisters about someone else's kitchen remodel or how difficult it was having an old woman lurking around. She always referred to me like I was furniture. And Daniel, he was gone early, off to the office job he hated but never tried to leave. No1 asked me if I needed breakfast. No1 offered a good morning. But I didn't need it, because I was meeting someone who still remembered who I was. Mr. Levinson arrived right on time, his briefcase in hand, his silver hair slicked back like always. We sat under the pergola in my garden, my sanctuary, the last space in the house they hadn't tried to repaint or modernize. As he pulled out the new documents, I handed him a neatly folded paper. My final decisions, I said. He read it over, his eyes scanning quickly. Then slowly, he looked up. You're sure? I've never been more sure. He nodded, then began writing. I'll have the copies ready in a few days, but this is solid. No one can contest it. They won't even try, I said, sipping my tea, because they won't see it coming. That evening, I baked cornbread, the same recipe my own mother passed down. I left it on the counter warm, golden, sliced neatly with butter on the side. Corey walked in and grabbed a piece. No thank you, no eye contact, just like his mother. She won't be around much longer. I watched him walk off without a word, my own grandson, and still, I didn't say anything, because soon, I wouldn't have to. They would all learn not through anger or confrontation, but through the truth written in black ink, signed, stamped, unchangeable. That night, I stared at the ceiling, thinking of all the ways people underestimate silence, how they confuse quiet with weakness, how they think that if you don't scream, you must not feel. But the truth is, silence carries more power than noise ever could, because when the day comes and it was coming, they won't remember the times they ignored me. They'll remember the moment I stood up without ever raising my voice and changed the course of everything they thought they owned. The next morning came with a strange kind of stillness. I was sipping tea on the porch, the same place where those words had first cut through me like glass. She won't be around much longer. A phrase that had replayed in my mind every hour since. Amanda came outside to get the mail. She looked at me well, through me, really, and offered nothing more than a fleeting glance before shuffling back inside, flipping through glossy catalogs and bills she had no idea were still in my name. I watched her pause at one envelope. With raised print elegant, embossed.it was from the law office. My law office. She didn't say a word, but her fingers clenched just slightly before she tossed the rest of the stack onto the entryway table and walked away. She never asked about it. Of course she didn't, because in her mind, I had nothing to do with law firms, or paperwork, or signatures. I was just the old woman in the background of her life, the ghost in the hallway. Later that day, Corey had friends over. They thundered through the house with loud voices and muddy shoes, shaking the walls like a stampede. No one told them to keep it down. No one apologized when I nearly slipped on the mess they left by the kitchen door. Daniel came home just as I was cleaning up the trail of dirt. "Mom, you really don't have to do that," he said casually, not even pausing to help. I smiled, softly. "Then why does it always fall to me?" He chuckled, brushing it off. "Amanda's got her hands full. I'm swamped at work. You know how it is." Yes, I did. I knew how it was when you gave people everything, and they assumed you owed them more. I had wiped noses and packed lunches and worked double shifts just to keep Daniel's childhood safe and full. Now I was wiping their floors again. The only difference? This time, I was doing it for people who didn't even see me. That night, I sat down at the dining table with a yellowing photo album one Amanda had tried to throw away, claiming it made the room look cluttered. Inside were pictures of Daniel as a boy, laughing in the sprinklers, blowing out candles, wrapped in towels on the porch after swimming in the old tin pool. And there I was in every frame, sometimes in the background, sometimes front and center, but always there, always showing up. The version of me in those photos felt like a different woman, one with soft, firelit eyes and shoulders that hadn't yet known the weight of being ignored. And then I reached the last page, a photo of Henry and me, arms linked in front of this very house, just after buying it. His handwriting on the back read, "Our forever home, for us and for her." He meant me. Me, not Amanda. Me, not Corey. Me, not the woman they assumed would fade like wallpaper. 2 days later, Mr. Levinson returned. He handed me the finalized documents in a slim black folder, with a small red seal pressed against the back page. "Is everything in here?" I asked. He nodded. "The trust, the asset list, the updated heir structure. You're set." I took a deep breath and ran my fingers over the leather spine. "What if they contest it?" He smiled. "They can try, but there are video witnesses, time-stamped filings, and 3 notarized copies. This house, your accounts, the property nearby, everything is exactly where you want it." I felt something inside me release. A knot, long held, finally loosening. "Thank you." "You know," he said, leaning in just slightly, "a lot of people your age talk about making things easier for the kids. You're the first I've seen who wants to make sure the right people are held accountable." I smiled faintly. Sometimes the easiest thing for them is to never learn. I won't let that happen. That afternoon, Amanda hosted a little gathering. Some of her friends from the yoga studio came over. Daniel grilled outside while the women drank mimosas and discussed new countertops and retreat plans. I stayed quiet again. Amanda didn't introduce me once. At one point, a woman in bright pink asked her, "Is that your housekeeper?" Amanda didn't correct her. She just laughed and said, "She's family. Technically, that word stung more than anything. Not mom, not mother-in-law. Just some vague placeholder. Technically.it was the last straw I needed. That evening, after the guests had gone and the sun had dipped low behind the trees, Daniel came to find me in the garden. He brought me a slice of leftover lemon cake and sat on the bench beside me. You okay, Mom? He asked. I looked at him for a long moment. You really want the answer to that? He hesitated. Sure. I set the cake down on the grass. You've built a life here, Daniel, but you forgot who built this house. He blinked. What do? You mean? I mean, you've all gotten very comfortable treating me like I'm disposable, like I'm already gone. His eyes dropped. That's not fair, isn't it? I said quietly. You let your son say things that should never be spoken in front of anyone, let alone a grandmother. You let your wife erase me one small insult at a time. And the worst part, you watched it happen. Daniel opened his mouth, but I stopped him with a raised hand. You don't need to explain, Daniel. You need to listen, because very soon, all those assumptions you've been making, they're going to cost you. And then I stood up, brushed the dirt from my knees, and walked inside, leaving the slice of lemon cake and touched on the grass. The next few days passed with an eerie calm, like the moment before a summer thunderstorm, the air heavy, charged with something unspoken. I began preparing quietly, not bags, not arguments, documents, receipts, titles, deeds, bank transfers, everything that proved what was mine and what had always been. I didn't need to scream or storm out to reclaim my worth. No. I would do what I had always done, hold my head high and let the truth do the talking. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen as Amanda was showing Corey a new phone case she had ordered. It was garish, with glitter and fake diamonds. When Corey spotted me, he snorted. Grandma wouldn't even know how to use a phone like this. Amanda giggled. She's too old for all that. I said nothing. I simply opened the drawer near the fridge, pulled out a small black envelope, and walked out without a word. That envelope held the new power of attorney document. Amanda never noticed. She didn't ask. She just went on thinking I was invisible. And honestly, that helped, because people reveal their true selves when they think you're powerless. The final trigger came the next morning. I was folding laundry in the back room when I overheard Amanda talking on the phone again. To her sister, I think. She doesn't contribute. I mean, we feed her, house her, and she just sits there like a relic. I told Daniel we need to gently suggest a nursing facility. My hands paused. A nursing facility? This was my house, my husband's house, the one I built a life in, the one where Daniel took his first steps, where Amanda now poured wine for her friends and laughed too loudly about my old-fashioned habits. They were planning my exile like it was a chore to check off their list. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice, but I did make one final call to Mr. Levinson, and I told him, deliver it. That evening, Amanda was preparing one of her Pinterest-worthy dinners: kale salad, lemon chicken, and her favorite, wine. Daniel was at the table. Corey had his headphones in, absorbed in some video game. I took my usual seat quietly. Dinner was almost done when the doorbell rang. Amanda glanced up, annoyed. Were we expecting anyone? Daniel shrugged. No idea. Corey didn't look up. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it calmly. Mr. Levinson stepped in, dressed in a sharp navy suit, briefcase in hand. Good evening, Margaret, he said with a warm smile. Amanda's face turned white the moment she saw him. Who's that? She asked. My lawyer, I replied. Daniel blinked. Lawyer? What for? Mr. Levinson laid his briefcase on the dining table like a judge about to deliver a verdict. He opened it smoothly, withdrew 3 sets of documents, and handed them out one by one for Amanda, one for Daniel, and one he kept for me. These, he began, are the updated estate filings, the revised deed ownership structure, and the living trust agreement. Amanda's eyes widened. Excuse me? Daniel stammered, flipping through the pages. Mom, what is this? I sat back down at the table, folded my hands neatly, and said, it's everything you assumed belonged to you. Return to the one who built it. Amanda stood up, voice rising. You're kicking us out. No, I replied calmly. You're removing yourselves, with your actions, with your words, with your disrespect. But we live here. You can't, Mr. Levinson cut in. Actually, she can, and she has. Daniel was speechless. Corey had finally taken off his headphones. Wait, are we being evicted? He asked, confused. I looked at my grandson, the same boy who, just days ago, thought I wouldn't be around much longer. No, sweetheart, I said gently. You're being reminded who helped raise you, and who you never saw standing right in front of you. Amanda shook her head, furious now. You can't do this. You're just some bitter old woman clinging to what's mine. I interrupted. No, Amanda, I'm not bitter. I'm simply done being erased. Daniel tried to reason. He always was the quieter one. Mom, wait, let's talk about this. You don't have to make such a drastic, but I do, I said. Because if I don't draw the line now, you'll just keep moving it. He sighed. Where will we go? I suggest you use the savings I've helped protect for the last 10 years. Amanda scoffed. You mean our savings? Mr. Levinson raised a brow. Actually, Margaret never co-signed those accounts, and she's kept receipts for every expense she's covered, including your car, Amanda. Amanda's jaw dropped. I stood up and faced them fully. You thought I was background noise in your lives, but I was the foundation. And now that you've tried to remove the foundation, the whole house is shaking. They said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. By the end of the week, they had begun packing. Daniel couldn't look me in the eye. Amanda didn't even try. And Corey, well, he was quiet now. Like maybe he had heard himself through my silence. I didn't kick them out onto the street. I gave them a month, 30 days to figure out what they never thought they'd lose. A roof, a legacy, a woman they thought would vanish without a sound. But I didn't vanish. I rose with calm power, with the law on my side, and with the truth finally seen. By the end of the week, there were cardboard boxes in every room, most of them Amanda's. Designer handbags she rarely used but displayed like trophies. Shoes that cost more than a month's groceries. A chrome espresso machine she insisted on importing from Italy even though she didn't drink coffee. None of it mattered now, because all of it would be packed and gone. I watched silently from the kitchen as she shuffled through the living room, instructing movers to be careful. With items she never paid for, the house echoed with the sound of tape being ripped and boxes being stacked. Daniel avoided me as much as he could. I wasn't sure if it was shame, guilt, or just discomfort at having to face the truth about the woman he married and the mother he ignored. Maybe all three. Corey was quiet too, for a 13-year-old who once mocked me without a second thought. He now moved through the house like a ghost, unsure of his place in a home that wasn't his anymore. I didn't punish him. Children reflect what they hear, what they're taught. But sometimes silence is a louder teacher than scolding. 2 days later, Daniel knocked on the garden door. I was pruning the rose bushes, the ones Henry planted when we first moved in. They'd bloomed beautifully this season, almost defiantly. Mom, he said softly, can I talk to you for a minute? I nodded but didn't stop pruning. He stood there awkwardly before finally saying, I didn't know how bad it got between you and Amanda. I turned to him. That's the problem, Daniel. You didn't know because you never looked. He sat down on the bench, shoulders slumped. I guess I assumed you were fine, that you didn't mind how things were. I didn't mind until the moment I realized I had become invisible, I said. And when I heard my own grandson say I wouldn't be around much longer, well, it made me realize you were all just waiting for me to disappear. Daniel rubbed his hands over his face. It was just a joke to you, not to me. There was a long silence. Finally, he said, I don't want to lose you, Mom. You already did, I replied. But you have a chance to find me again, not through apologies, but through change. He nodded slowly. I want to try. I looked at him, really looked. He was still my son, still the little boy who once brought me dandelions and cried when his toy broke. But he was also the man who stood by silently while his wife humiliated me in the house I built. Forgiveness, I knew, would take time, but the first step was truth. You have 22 days left, I said. Make them count. Amanda didn't take it as well. Of course she didn't. This is ridiculous, she said to Daniel later that night. I heard her through the wall. Your mother is unstable. She's trying to destroy us. She's protecting what's hers, he replied. Amanda scoffed. We're a family. Were we? Daniel asked. Because you never treated her like one. There was a long silence before Amanda hissed. You're going to regret this. I smiled faintly from my room. No, Amanda, you will. A few days later, the neighbors began to notice the shift. Mrs. Hartley, who lived next door, came by with banana bread and curiosity. I heard you're making some changes, she said, handing me the loaf. I laughed. That's putting it gently. She leaned in conspiratorially. We always wondered how you put up with that one, she said, referring to Amanda. She walks around like she owns the block. Well, I said, slicing the bread. Soon she won't even own the doormat. Mrs. Hartley chuckled. Good for you, Margaret. About time someone put their foot down. It felt strange, This new wave of support, people I thought had been silent out of disinterest were, in fact, watching, waiting, hoping I'd stand up. I hadn't just reclaimed my house. I was reclaiming my place. I began making small changes. In the home, too. I brought back my photo albums and placed them in the living room, right where Amanda had removed them. I unearthed old family recipes and baked again real bread, not store-bought baguettes wrapped in brown paper. I opened the curtains she always kept closed to protect the furniture. And suddenly, the house felt like home again, not just a place I lived, a place that remembered me, welcomed me, reflected me. One night, Corey approached me while I was sitting in the study. He had something in his hand, a framed photo of Daniel, as a baby, cradled in my arms. "Was this me?" he asked. I smiled. "No, sweetheart, that's your father." He looked at the photo for a long time. "You looked happy." "I was," I said. "Back then, the house was full of love, not noise, not status, just love." Corey hesitated, then whispered, "I'm sorry for what I said that day." It took me a moment to respond, because it wasn't just the words. It was the recognition. The first time he saw me as someone with a heart to break. "I forgive you," I said, hugging him tightly, "and I'll always love you, even if everything else had changed." That had in single quotes T.by. Day 20, Amanda had mostly packed her things. Daniel was slower. He didn't pack much at all. In fact, he had moved into the guest room temporarily. I didn't ask why. I already knew. The distance between them was now visible. Amanda no longer barked orders. She paced, fumed, tried to manipulate, but I stayed silent because when the truth has already been signed and sealed, you don't need to argue. You just watch them come to terms with it, and that's exactly what I did. I stood at the kitchen window that morning, watering my plants, watching Amanda's luxury car pull away for errands, and I whispered to myself, let them see who they tried to erase, and let them remember. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I decided I would host one final dinner, not a celebration, not a farewell, a reminder, a statement without needing to raise my voice, something Amanda would never understand. I cooked all day. The dishes weren't fancy, no kale, no truffle oil, no imported cheeses, just the meals that had once filled Daniel's childhood: pot roast, green beans, mashed potatoes with extra butter, my famous apple pie. The smell brought memories rushing back. It filled the walls with more warmth than Amanda's minimalist decor ever had. I set the table with the old ceramic plates Henry and I bought at a roadside market. The same ones Amanda once mocked for looking too rustic. They weren't designer, but they held years of laughter, stories, and hands held around grace. That night, Daniel, Amanda, and Corey came to the table hesitant, curious. I didn't say much at first. I just served the food, one plate at a time. Corey was the first to speak. This smells really good. I smiled. It's the same pot roast your dad loved when he was your age. Daniel looked down at his plate, nostalgia flickering across his face. Amanda, of course, barely touched anything. She pushed food around with her fork, then sighed dramatically. So what is this exactly? Your big goodbye dinner? I looked at her and said gently, no, it's your thank you dinner. She blinked. Excuse me? Yes, I said, setting my napkin down. Thank you for reminding me how strong I really am, for showing me that silence can only protect people who deserve it, and for helping me remember whose name is actually on the deed. Daniel looked up, tense. Amanda scoffed. Oh, please, this again? This always, I replied calmly. You see, Amanda, the house, the money, the land, it was never yours. You walked in here assuming you'd inherit comfort, but comfort is earned, and disrespect has consequences. Corey sat perfectly still, his eyes darting between us. Amanda leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So this is just about control, ego. You want us crawling back begging? I tilted my head. No, I don't want you crawling back at all. I paused, then added, I want you to leave knowing who I am. Not the woman you whispered about behind my back, not the one you pushed to the corner at holidays, but the woman who built this house, who paid the bills, who put a roof over your heads, and who finally remembered her own worth. Daniel swallowed hard. His voice cracked slightly. Mom, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything tonight, I said. You need to feel what it's like to sit at a table set by a woman you tried to erase and realize you'll never sit at it again unless you truly change. Amanda stood up, knocking her chair slightly. I don't need this melodrama. No, I said, standing slowly. But you needed the reality check, and now you have it. She stormed off, muttering something under her breath. Daniel stayed, seated, his face pale, eyes misty. I should have stood up for you sooner, he said. I touched his shoulder. You still can. That night, after dishes were cleared and silence returned, I went into the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. Dust clung to everything like time itself had been stored in those boxes. I pulled out the box marked Henry's will and letters. Inside were the originals, documents Amanda never knew existed. Henry had been smart, quiet, but smart. He saw people for who they were before they even showed it. And in his handwriting, dated 15 years ago, was a letter, addressed simply, for Margaret in case they forget. I unfolded it with trembling hands. My love, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong, but I know you. You won't make a scene. You'll stay quiet for too long. And then, one day, someone will try to rewrite your place in this home. Don't let them. You deserve to be seen, respected, and loved. This house, it's yours. Always. Not because of a piece of paper, but because no one loved it like you did. Don't let them forget who made it a home. Tears streamed silently down my face. He knew. Even then, he knew. The next morning, Daniel knocked on my door. He was holding something, a photo of Henry, one I hadn't seen in years. I found this in the old desk, he said. I thought, you might want it. I took it gently. It was Henry in his workshop, smiling proudly with wood shavings all over his apron. Thanks, I said. Daniel hesitated. Mom, I want to stay. I looked up, he continued. Not because of the house. Not because I want anything, but because I need to rebuild something with you. And with Corey. Amanda's already packing to go back to her mother's. She's angry, and honestly, she doesn't understand what she lost. I studied him, the boy I raised, the man I'd watched drift further away. Was he finally coming back? Then, stay, I said, but not just in the house. Stay in the work, the effort, the heart. He nodded, emotion cracking in his voice. I will. Amanda left 2 days later. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't slam doors or cry. She just vanished the same way she tried to make me vanish. But I was still here, not just present, alive, rooted, reclaimed. I redecorated the house. Nothing extravagant, just subtle changes that felt like me. Photos returned to the walls, soft throws on the armchairs, lemon verbena in the kitchen window again, and laughter real. Gentle laughter began to return, not from parties, not from polite clinks of wine glasses, but from quiet dinners, board games, gardening together, from Corey sitting next to me during homework and asking, "Can you tell me what Grandpa was like again?" From Daniel leaving his phone behind when we had coffee on the porch, the same porch where I once sat, broken, after hearing my grandson speak as if I was already gone. Now they listened, they saw me, they remembered. Weeks passed, and with Amanda gone, the atmosphere in the house slowly shifted like the turning of seasons. It wasn't immediate. Healing never is. But there were signs, small, steady signs that something was mending between us. Corey stopped rolling his eyes. He started saying please and thank you. He sat with me while I crocheted in the evenings, occasionally asking questions about the old days or telling me snippets about his school. Daniel, too, seemed to be unraveling some tightly wound guilt. He began checking in on me before leaving for work, occasionally cooking breakfast on weekends, like he used to when he was young and eager to impress me. But I knew Amanda's absence had left a complicated silence behind. Sometimes silence is peace, and sometimes it's the echo of damage done. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon, sunny, peaceful. I was on the porch watering my petunias when my phone rang. Mrs. Margaret Lewis? A voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Diane from Hammond and Clark Law Firm. I'm calling regarding the execution of your late husband's secondary trust. My heart skipped. Secondary trust? I asked carefully. Yes, ma'am. It appears your husband set up an auxiliary estate plan triggered only under specific circumstances. You've been listed as the sole executor and beneficiary. I paused. I thought we'd handled everything after he passed. There were stipulations. Your husband anticipated that certain family members might behave unfavorably. If they did, he instructed us to notify you after a year. That date passed last month. I almost laughed. Of course, Henry had planned ahead. He knew me better than I knew myself. What do I need to do? Just come in. We'll review everything. I didn't tell Daniel about the appointment. Not yet. I needed to understand what Henry had done. When I sat down in the lawyer's office that Thursday, Diane slid a thick envelope across the polished wood table. Inside was a handwritten letter sealed and yellowing slightly from time. On the front, "For Margaret if they ever forget who you are." My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Margaret, my darling, if you're reading this, it means things have unfolded exactly as I feared. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they love you like I did. But if they don't, if they ever reduce you to a shadow in your own home, this is my final gift. The property in South Carolina, the rental homes in New Haven, and the savings account in our secret fund, they're all yours now. You don't need to explain. You don't need to fight. Just know, I saw you. I always saw you. And I wanted to make sure no one could ever take that away. Love always." Henry held the letter against my heart, eyes wet, but not broken. Not this time. The assets Henry left weren't just substantial, they were transformative. He had planned for a moment when my own family might betray me and ensured I'd never be dependent on anyone again. I walked out of that office taller than I'd felt in years, not because of the money, because I had been remembered, because someone had loved me enough to think ahead to protect me from being forgotten. That night, I cooked again, just for Daniel and Corey, grilled cheese, tomato soup, and apple slices. Daniel noticed my mood. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm better than okay," I said. Henry left me a few surprises, things meant to keep me safe if anyone ever treated me like I didn't belong. Daniel's face flushed. "Mom, it's all right," I interrupted, softly. "What matters is what you do now, going forward." He nodded, eyes low. We ate quietly for a while before Corey blurted, "Can I live here forever?" I laughed gently. "Well, not forever. But for as long as you're kind, respectful, and never forget that no one is disposable, especially the ones who raised you." He nodded, cheeks red. A week later, I made another decision. It was time to update my will, not as a warning, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Diane, the lawyer, helped me write a clause that reflected everything I had learned over these painful months. Daniel would still receive a share, a fair one if he continued on the path of reconnection. But Corey, he would inherit the heart of it. The South Carolina land, the New Haven homes, the investments, because he was young enough to grow into someone better, and because he had learned, even if late, how to look at me and see a person, not just an old woman in the corner. As for Amanda, she wouldn't see a dime, not because I hated her, but because you don't reward cruelty. You don't hand inheritance to someone who laughs while shoving you out of your own life. By the end of the month, the house was humming with new energy. I redecorated the guest room Amanda used to claim as her personal spa space. It became a reading room. Bookshelves lined the walls. A rocking chair sat near the window. Soft throw blankets waited for quiet afternoons. I invited neighbors for tea. I started attending the local art group again, sketching, painting, even selling a few pieces at the community fair. Daniel, one evening, offered to drive me. "I don't mind walking," I told him. "I know," he said, "but I want to." It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was honest. And those, I'd learned, were the gestures that mattered. One evening, I sat on the porch again, same chair, same view. But everything had changed. Corey joined me, curling up beside me with his tablet. After a few minutes, he asked, "Grandma?" "Yes, love?" "Why didn't you get mad when I said those things about you?" I looked at him, eyes soft. "Because if I had gotten mad, you wouldn't have heard me. But when I stayed calm, the silence made space for you to listen." He looked down, then whispered, "I'm really sorry." I kissed his forehead. "I know, and you're growing. That's what matters." Spring settled softly over the neighborhood, draping the trees in blossoms and waking the birds earlier each morning. It was as if even nature had exhaled now that peace had returned to my home. But inside me, something deeper had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not just noticed, but understood, respected. Still, I knew something had to be done, something to ensure that this transformation wasn't temporary. So I started writing. Not a letter, not a will, but a legacy. Binder, Henry used to say, memories fade, but written words last longer than breath. So I sat at my little desk in the sunroom and began recording everything. Family recipes, little traditions, the story of how Henry built the tool shed out back with his bare hands, even my favorite lullaby I used to hum to Daniel. I wrote it, all not just for Corey, but for the generations to come. Because when people forget where they come from, they forget who they are. and I had almost let them forget me. One afternoon, Daniel knocked on the doorframe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Thought, "You might need this," he said, setting one down. I looked up and smiled. "Thanks." He hesitated, then sat across from me. "I've been thinking a lot lately. I've spent so many years trying to move up that I didn't realize I was stepping over the very person who gave me everything." There it was, the thing I'd waited to hear, not because I needed validation, but because I needed him to see the full picture. I was angry for a long time, I admitted. Not just at Amanda, at you too, for letting her chip away at me like I was furniture gathering dust. He looked away, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry," he said, "and not the casual kind of sorry. I mean the kind that sits in your chest and makes it hard to sleep at night." I nodded. "Then I believe you." And I did, because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet understanding that someone is finally willing to do better. Later that week, I took Corey on a walk. We stopped by the park, sat under the same tree Daniel used to climb as a boy. He looked up at the branches and asked, "Did you ever think I was bad?" "No," I replied, "but I worried you'd grow up not knowing kindness." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," he said, "for school, but also for you." I unfolded the paper. It was titled, "My grandmother is the strongest person I know." Tears pooled in my eyes as I read his words. "She doesn't wear a cape or punch bad guys, but she stood still when people tried to push her out. She didn't yell. She didn't hit back. She just stood taller. And somehow, that was louder than anything else." I folded the paper and tucked it into my coat pocket right over my heart. "Thank you," I whispered. "No," he said. "Thank you." Amanda didn't return. Occasionally, Daniel mentioned she called or texted, but he never seemed eager to engage. She had shown her true self, and the house no longer echoed with her sharp voice or icy presence. And for that, I was grateful. I wasn't interested in revenge. That had never been the point. Restoration was. The right people had remained. The wrong ones had removed themselves. As summer approached, I called a family meeting. Just me, Daniel, and Corey. We sat in the living room, the windows open, soft wind weaving through the curtains. "I want to tell you what's in my will," I began. Daniel raised his eyebrows. "Mom, you don't need to." "I do," I said, "because secrets breed resentment, and I've had enough of that for one lifetime." They both leaned in. "I've left the house to Corey, on one condition: he must live in it for at least 5 years before deciding what to do with it. No selling, no flipping, no abandoning." Corey's eyes widened. "Me? Yes. Because you've learned something most adults don't understand. That respect is not optional. It's a choice, one that you made, even after your mistakes." He nodded, serious and still. To Daniel, I continued, "I've left the lake cabin. You always loved that place, and I know you'll take care of it." Daniel blinked. "I thank you." And to Amanda, I said, pausing for breath, "I've left nothing, not out of spite, out of principle, because no one should benefit from cruelty." The next morning, I received a letter from the local community center. They had accepted my proposal for a living history workshop, something I'd pitched to teach kids about family legacies and the stories elders carry. I smiled, reading the approval. Note.it was time to pass it on. Not just wealth but wisdom. And maybe that was the true revenge. Not anger, not retribution, but choosing to rise higher, live better, and leave the door open only for those who truly belonged. That evening, we had dinner on the porch. Daniel grilled, Corey set the table, and I made peach cobbler from scratch. The same cobbler Amanda once said smelled too sweet. This time, it smelled perfect. After the meal, Corey sat beside me, leaning his head on my shoulder. "You're the coolest grandma," he said sleepily. I laughed. "Cooler than your TikTok." "Way cooler," he mumbled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in warm gold. I looked out at the garden, the home, the family. They once forgot who I was, but now they'd never forget again. Not because I shouted, not because I begged, but because I stood, quietly, powerfully, unshakably.